Hey guys, welcome to the Elevate online experience. Buckle up because we've been expecting you. If you're brand new to this channel, or maybe you've been joining us for a few weeks now, how about helping us out and liking our channel, subscribing to our channels, and maybe sharing them with a friend or a family member that you reckon may be interested. River Valley Worship from the United States of America is our awesome worship partner today. Maybe if you're at home, join and sing along.
Still small voice, align my heart to hear you when my faith runs cold. Spirit help me, and love's long flame stir my soul, my compass when the road runs cold. Spirit guide me, I'm running straight to you. When it's all I can do, I'm running straight to you. 'Cause you're my true north, yeah, yeah. East and west still call my name, but I for the greater call. Jesus, lead me, I'm running straight to you. When it's all I can do, I'm running straight to you. My true north, I'm running straight to you. When it's all I can do, I'm running straight to you. My true north, I hear you calling me higher. I set on you, and when I walk through fire, I will not be moved. I hear you calling me higher. I set on you, and when I walk through fire, I will not be moved. To you, my true north, sing it, I'm running straight to you. When it's all I can do, I'm running straight to you. My true north, yeah, yeah. You're my true north, yeah. I can hear my Savior calling, take up your cross and follow me. Let my heart move in sweet surrender. Lord, it's my joy to say yes to you. Send me, I'll go anywhere, send me, I'll go anywhere, I'll go anywhere. This is my prayer for every nation, to hear your name be lifted high, Lord, as your church and as your children. Oh, it's our joy to say yes to you. Send me, send me. I'll go anywhere, I'll go anywhere. Send me, send me. I'll go anywhere, I'll go anywhere. Send me, send me, send me. I'll go anywhere, I'll go anywhere. One more time. Send me, send me. I'll go anywhere, I'll go anywhere. Hear my heart respond, a resounding yes. I will trust you all my days, until your name is heard in the darkest place. I will shine the light of Jesus. Send me, send me. I'll go anywhere. Oh, I'll go anywhere. I'll go. Send me, send me. I'll go anywhere. Oh, I'll go anywhere. Yeah, I'll go anywhere. Oh, yes, I'll go anywhere. Anywhere you want me to, Lord. Oh, I'll go anywhere, anywhere. Oh, that's fine by me. Oh, I'll go anywhere. Oh, Jesus. I'll go, I'll go, I'll go. I can hear my Savior calling. Take up your cross and follow me.
Here it is, guys. Week 3 of Change Your World in 52 days, taken by our very own senior leader, Mark Pomery.
Sanballat and Tobiah did everything within their power to stop the work of God's people. Tobiah mocked Nehemiah. If a fox were to climb that wall, it would crumble under his weight. Nehemiah was not deterred and turned to God for strength. This week, how to defeat discouragement and overcome opposition so you can finish the work God called you to do.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today. Hey, before we get into the message, I just want to give you a quick shout out to those of you who have been liking, following, subscribing, and most of all, sharing our online experience with people. You know, this is one of the incredible opportunities we have all across the globe to reach people and build people using the internet, the digital superhighway. And when you like, when you subscribe, when you share, it makes our Elevate online experience more visible and ultimately helps us reach and build more people. So well done, and let's keep doing that. Now, today, this is the third week of a series called Change Your World in 52 Days, looking at, really a flyover of the life and the story of Nehemiah. Let me give you a little bit of a recap of Nehemiah. Nehemiah kind of enters into the pages of history after the walls and the city of Jerusalem had been lying in ruins for 140 years. So the Jewish people had been run out of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians effectively destroyed the city, and the Jewish people had been living in exile in various parts of the known world, including Nehemiah. You know, he was this point that we find him in history, living and working in the palace of the king of Persia, which was about 1,600 kilometers away from Jerusalem. So, you know, in those days, that might as well have almost been on another planet. It was so far away. Now, since after the Babylonians had destroyed Jerusalem, the Persians eventually overran the Babylonians and became the known superpower of the region. And the Persians actually allowed a remnant of Jewish people to return to Jerusalem. And they got about trying to rebuild the city, the temple, the walls, the gates. Suffice to say, it didn't work out and they fell way short. Now, Nehemiah, whilst working in the palace of the king of Persia, actually received a visit from his brother and some other close friends, and Nehemiah inquired about the state of Jerusalem. You know, how's things going there? And the news wasn't good. You know, his brother gave him a very honest report. You know, the walls are down, the people are discouraged, it's a disgrace, and we're all pretty embarrassed, actually. And rather than deflecting, you know, like, not my problem, which for Nehemiah, that would have been, I think, both easy and also understandable. I mean, he's 1,600 kilometers away, not my problem. The very beginnings of this issue was God allowed the Babylonians to overrun the Jewish people because the Jewish people had stopped putting God first. And this happened 140 years ago, multiple generations before Nehemiah heard this news. Again, he could have easily said, not my problem. I didn't cause this. It wasn't even my parents or my grandparents. This was generations before. But he didn't. He opened his heart. He allowed himself to be vulnerable. And ultimately, he felt God personally calling him to, well, actually not return to Jerusalem because he'd never been there before. Instead, to actually go to Jerusalem, the land of his ancestors, and lead the rebuilding of the city and the walls, a brand new charge. So he asked his boss, the king of Persia, if he could be sent. And not only sent, he was wise enough to ask if the king would give him some letters of favor and also allow him to have access to some of the forests for raw materials that he could and the people could access to use for rebuilding the walls. Now, this last point is super important. I just want to pause here and highlight this. You see, the reality is that you won't always have everything you need to do what God's calling you to do at the moment of the calling. See, when Nehemiah first responded to God's call, when he first said, yes, I will do it, I will go, I will lead this charge, he had nothing. He had no physical resources, no financial resources, no human resources. He literally, in fact, the only thing he had was a call from God and the ear of the king of Persia. And this is where a lot of people kind of miss it, kind of check out, kind of say, well, they kind of assume because I don't have everything I need, obviously God's not calling me to this, because if he was calling me, he would have provided everything I needed at the beginning. And this is a mistake. This is a misunderstanding, because God's provision is almost always an unfolding drama. It almost always begins in seed form, in the form of raw materials, and not all of the raw materials we need. And we think the mistake we can make is if it's not all there, and or if it's not plug and play and ready-made, then God mustn't be calling us to do it. And yet this is the journey of faith, trusting God every single step of the way. So when God's calling us to do something, the big idea and the pro tip is don't look at what you don't have and crop yourself out, but rather look at what you actually do have. It might not be everything, but it's something. It's a starting point. And Nehemiah had a call from God and the ear of the king of Persia. That's all he had. And yet he used both of those things to get started. So if you missed either of the first 2 weeks of this series, then head over to your favorite podcast platform, type in Elevate Church Perth, and you'll find us, and you can listen to both of them. And again, look, as with our online experience, share those messages with the people in your sphere. Now, today, I'm going to drop us into Nehemiah chapter 2. If you've got your smart phone handy, pop open the camera app, scan this flow code. It's going to take you there, and I'm going to take us to the Message version. So, fast forward. Nehemiah's left the palace of the king of Persia. He's traveled the 1,600 kilometers to get to Jerusalem, and he's done, what you kind of would think is a smart play. He went on an inspection. He did a lap to assess where things were actually at. And then he gathered people, and he started casting a vision for rebuilding the city walls. He started injecting hope where there was discouragement. And here's one of the most important lessons I've learned in leadership. If God's called you to do something, then stop asking, can I do it? Can we do it? And shift the question to, how can I do it? How can we do it? It's the exact same question with the word how. Not if, how. Not can I do it, how can I do it? Not can we do it, how can we do it? It's not about whether you're going to, no, it's how. We're going to get into this. And the people responded to Nehemiah's vision casting, and they said, let's start rebuilding. And so they began the good work. Well, like any good Hollywood drama, just when everything seems to be going well, progressing nicely, the work's about to begin. It's very exciting. People have a new enthusiasm, hope restored. Insert spoiler. Whenever you move forward for God, opposition shows up. And this might seem a little counterintuitive, because we might think that opposition shows up when we're doing something wrong, but actually, it's more typical that opposition shows up when we're doing something right. Now, consequences show up when we're doing something wrong, but opposition shows up when we're doing something right. See, when we start doing something right, when we start doing the work that God's called us to do, the enemy takes notice. And the enemy wants to stop us, intercept us, keep us down, hold us back, turn us off. And this is what it looked like at the jump-off point for Nehemiah and the people. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they laughed at us, mocking, "Ha ha, what do you think you're doing? Do you think you can cross the king?" See, these were a group of political opponents who had been used to the Jewish people for the last 140 years, been essentially not wiped out, but defeated and discouraged, and they wanted to maintain the political status quo and wanted to maintain their own power and influence and probably wealth. And so they did what you'd expect them to do. They started to try to discourage the Jewish people. And here's the first type of discouragement that we'll find when we start doing what God's called us to do. It's external discouragement. These weren't Jewish people. They had nothing to do with the city of Jerusalem, but they started chirping and chiming in, discouraging from the outside. Now, external discouragement comes in two forms. Firstly, it can come in the form of obstacles. You know, we get into the work and we bump up against a lack of resources, or we bump up against a setback, or we bump up against a barrier. And the other one, and this is what this one looked like, is that external discouragement can come in the form of criticism. When you start doing what God's called you to do, very quickly the critics start to chirp. 13 years ago, I took over the leadership of what's now Elevate Church, and we began the process of doing certain things differently, very much a different ministry approach than what had existed. We started implementing a new culture and developing a new culture different to what had existed. And I remember very early on in my leadership, finished preaching, we wound up our live experience here in Perth, and I was just moving around the auditorium, just say hi to people, check in. And a particular guy got right up in my grill to give me some feedback. Now these days, I regularly get feedback, as do all of our teaching team, and it's overwhelmingly positive. People thanking us, encouraging us. That really helped me. I was really, God spoke to me through that. Well, this wasn't that type of feedback. In fact, this particular gentleman said to me, "I know what you're trying to do here, and it's not going to work." How you respond to criticism, how you respond to external discouragement matters. And by the way, I use the word respond and not react because, by the way, sometimes the best form of response is to say nothing at all. Don't even dignify the criticism, which is exactly what I did. I just walked away from this clown. But Nehemiah felt the need to respond by saying something to these political opponents. And this is what he wrote: "I shot back, the God of heaven will make sure we succeed." Didn't make it personal, but he reminded them who he was appointed by and empowered by. Now, sometimes that's the end of it. The critics back down, they shut up, they go away, they move on to start criticizing someone else. I don't know. But sometimes it's not. In fact, sometimes the critics kind of double down. Well, read through Nehemiah chapter 3 by yourself. I don't have time, but you'll start to see the people really were making progress. And then we turn the page that Nehemiah records into chapter 4. When Sanballat, him again, heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he exploded in anger, vilifying the Jews. In the company of his Samaritan cronies and military, he let loose, "What are these miserable Jews doing? Do they think they can get everything back to normal overnight, make building stones out of make-believe?" And no surprise, at his side, Tobiah the Ammonite, yeah, that guy, jumped in and said, "Yeah, that's right. What do they think they're building? Why, if a fox climbed that wall, it would fall to pieces under his weight." I mean, this is brutal. Can we just be honest for a moment here? When you've been working hard, doing what God's called you to do, and people start criticizing you, what do? You know, maybe like Nehemiah, you've sacrificed, you've prayed, you've been working hard, you haven't been asking for anybody to pat you on the back or pin a medal on your chest. You've just been doing the work God's called you to do, and then the critics show up. It's tempting to start to feel sorry for yourself. You know, Nehemiah could have done, "Oh God, don't you know I left the palace of the king for this? Don't you know I traveled on foot for 1,600 kilometers to do this? Don't you know that I've had to rally and raise support and people and lead them, and I've got no experience, and I'm just doing the best I can. And look, I don't have time for this. I mean, come on, really?" And it could be tempting to throw your toys out of the cot, and that's the end of the story. The critics won. You know, I don't need this in my life. I'm going back to the palace. Or at least somebody appreciates me. Well, thankfully, not Nehemiah. And by the way, I don't think we'd be reading about Nehemiah today and learning from him if that's what he did. Instead, Nehemiah prayed again. "Oh, listen to us, dear God. We are so despised." By the way, not discouraged. Now he's just like, this is about boomerang their ridicule on their heads. Have their enemies cart them off as war trophies to a land of no return. Don't forgive their iniquity. Don't wipe away their sin. They've insulted the builders, and we kept at it, repairing and rebuilding the wall. See, here's Nehemiah's pro tip. Take it to God and get back to work. When the critics come at you, let God fight that. Let God deal with them and get back to work. Because it's what you're doing, it's called by God. It's too important. You don't work for the critics. You work for God. Sign up for duty, look for His approval, and let Him deal with the critics and get back to work. Okay, so there's external discouragement. And then there's the second type of discouragement, and that's internal discouragement. Now, some of that forms inside your head, and I'm not going to get into this, and we talk about internal narratives a lot. We just finished a series called Anxious for Nothing, and you can go back and listen to that and learn from that. This is what I'm going to show you is the sort of internal discouragement in Nehemiah's case that came from amongst his own people. But soon word was going around in Judah. By the way, that should be a red flag right there. When you going, soon word was going around, not facts, just word, rumors. The builders are pooped. The rubbish piles up. We're in over our heads. We can't rebuild this wall. And they're about halfway done at this point. Halfway done, meaning they'd started from zero, having failed in previous attempts, and they're already halfway there. Sounds like a Bon Jovi song. Anyway, and they started to get discouraged among themselves. We don't have what it takes. And this sort of discouragement is actually more insidious than external discouragement. See, external discouragement looks like opposition. This doesn't look like opposition. This looks like taking the temperature. But the damage potential of this sort of word was going around is often more catastrophic than any sort of external discouragement can be. Because if this sort of narrative is left unchecked, it can lead to groupthink. Oh yeah, now that you mention it. And it can become the prevailing narrative and spread like a virus. And people that actually weren't discouraged or tired start to feel like, oh yeah, now that, oh yeah. And this is one of the reasons following Jesus is a team sport. That yeah, when we're together doing what God's called us to do, there will be times and circumstances and seasons where one or some of us are a little tired, are a little discouraged. Sure, and don't deny it. Then the rest of us who aren't tired and discouraged, rather than jumping down the hole for the purpose of joining them permanently in the hole, we jump down the hole to help lift them back up so that they can have their energy and their hope and their faith and their vision restored, and we can continue doing the work that God's called us to do. Nehemiah offered up the antidote. Put your minds on the master. Great and awesome. Don't focus on the critics. Don't focus on what we haven't yet accomplished without remembering what we've already accomplished. Yeah, we still have halfway to go. I mean, let's not deny it's going to be challenging, but man, look at how far we've already come. Look at how far God's already brought us. And so in these moments, we definitely look through the windscreen at what's ahead, and we also glance in the rearview mirror to see how far we've already come and get encouraged by the progress we've made, get encouraged by the fact that the same God that's brought us this far will absolutely be willing and able to take us all the way to the finish line. In fact, the whole thing that Nehemiah said to them is, put your minds on the master, great and awesome, and then fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Focus on God and keep fighting for the cause and the call that He's had for you.
Hey guys, how about you help us at Elevate Church reach and build into people just like you all over the planet? The ways to give can be found just below. Anyway guys, thank you so much for joining us on week 3. Have a great week and we'll see you next time.